Welcome everyone. Today we are going to learn about basic facts on plasma membrane. In my previous two videos, I have discussed how scientists discovered that biomembranes are chemically lipid in nature and these lipids are structurally bilayer. So we have reached up to lipid bilayer. Now in this video, we are going to learn about membrane proteins. Now in 1920s to 1930s, many cell biologists obtained evidence that suggests that there is more to the structure of membranes than just lipid bilayer. So lipid bilayer is just basic structure, but there must be something to the membrane. And they point one mechanism, that is the transportation of molecules in the cell. Transport. Okay, now let me explain. We know that in nature there is two kinds of molecules are present. One is called polar molecules and there is called non-polar molecules. Okay. Example of polar molecules are like water, alcohol, glucose, etc. Okay. And examples of non-polar molecules like oils, fats, basically they are lipids. Okay. So we know that polar molecules and non-polar molecules do not mix. Water, oil do not mix. But also we know that a non-polar or polar molecules can mix well with polar molecules, like water and alcohol can mix, water, glucose can mix. And the vice versa is also true. Non-polar molecules can mix well with non-polar molecules. So there is no problem with same category molecules, but when it comes polar and non-polar, they do not mix. Why I'm talking about this? Because transportation requires this chemical nature. Why? Because Ernest Overton, one scientist I have mentioned in my first video, Ernest Overton, in 1895 discovered that the chemical nature of membrane is lipid. Now let's suppose the membrane, let's suppose this is the plasma membrane. So this membrane is actually lipid in nature. Now he argued, Ernest Overton argued, that if this is lipid in nature, this membrane is actually lipid in nature, then non-polar molecules can dissolve in it. Let's suppose this is a non-polar molecules present in the outside of the cell, and this is, let's suppose this is the outside of the cell and this is the inside of the cell. Now he argued that, Ernest Overton, that molecules to enter inside the cell, this molecule must dissolve, at first dissolve in the plasma membrane, then it can come inside the cell. Okay, so non-polar, as I have mentioned, that membrane is actually non-polar in nature, so it will prefer non-polar molecules to get enter inside the cell. So non-polar molecule will be will rapidly enter inside the cell. But what about other polar molecules like glucose, water, or any amino acids that are polar in nature? They also transport through membrane. So through just lipid membrane, they do not actually transport. So there required some proteins that helps in the transport of polar molecules from outside to inside or inside to outside. Okay, so from these mechanisms, they actually pointed out that there must be something present in the plasma membrane. Now, here I want to mention one thing, that it could be any membranes from eukaryotic cells or prokaryotic cells or cell organelles, like membranes that surrounds the nucleus or the endoplasmic reticulum or Golgi complex or mitochondria, chloroplast. Whatever it is, the basic architecture of plasma membrane is lipid bilayer. But the difference comes when the composition of the lipids. The composition of lipids in the intracellular organelles like nucleus or any intracellular organelles, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi complex, they differ in the composition of composition of the proteins, and that gives, this protein gives distinctive activities to the cell or to the cell organ. So protein is so important for performance of any activity to the cell. So protein is important because basic architecture is lipid bilayer, but proteins give distinctive activities to the different cells. It could be skin cells, liver cells, Okay, and it could be different cell organelles. Okay, so protein is very important. Now, what are the major functions performed by proteins? We have to know major functions that performed by proteins in the plasma membrane. Okay, the first you can remember, that is transport. It helps in the transportation of polar molecules from outside to inside or inside to outside. Transportation. Second is cell signaling. Proteins can help in cell signaling in the plasma membrane. They can act as receptor. Okay. Third is they help in cell-cell communication. And fourth is this proteins that present in the plasma membrane can attach with cytoskeleton, cell cytoskeleton. Cell cytoskeleton basically are meshwork of many proteins that are just present beneath the plasma membrane. Now, proteins that are actually present in the plasma membrane can bind with this cytoskeleton. Cytoskeletons actually provide mechanical support. It helps to assume the cell a proper shape, and during the cell movement it helps. So all these are the major functions performed by proteins present in the plasma membrane. Now, we can categorize these membrane proteins into three types. Okay, I'm just mentioning here the name of these three different category of proteins present in the plasma membrane. First is called integral or transmembrane protein. Second is lipid anchored membrane protein, and third is peripheral membrane protein. Okay, now in this video I'm not going to talk about these proteins in more details, because I will make separate videos, but just I want to show you how these proteins looks. Let's suppose this is the lipid bilayer structure of plasma membrane. Integral membrane proteins or transmembrane proteins basically traverse, or I can say span both the bilayer of the plasma membrane. So this is integral membrane protein. Okay, and lipid anchored protein can bind with fatty acids. So let's suppose this the fatty acids, and this lipid anchored protein can bind with the fatty acids, and this bond is actually covalent in nature. Covalent bond. So they make covalent bond with the fatty acids, and they hang with the fatty acids present in the lipid bilayer. So this is lipid anchor proteins. Another kind of proteins present, that is peripheral proteins. Peripheral proteins can indirectly bind with integral membrane proteins, or it can bind with lipid anchored proteins. Also, these proteins can bind outside peripheral membrane proteins. Also, these peripheral membrane proteins can actually bind with the polar head groups of the lipid molecules, but this interaction is actually ionic or non-covalent, very weak interactions. Non-covalent bond or ionic bond. Okay. Hope this video will help you. Thank you for watching, and always keep learning.